Hello, welcome to another Q&A video. I left out one question, so sorry Daniel, Visionofcomics. I forgot to answer his questions. Somehow I skipped over it, but I'm glad he brought it up because I look at the question and it's kind of complex and it might require a long answer, so this might take up the whole 10 minutes. So here we go. What do you think about how Marvel and DC have historically treated its creative members? Do you think retaining rights to character and keeping pay low has made for more robust company, or has it scared off creators from trying new and interesting stories? There's a lot of moving parts in that question, but let's tackle this issue first. What do I think of how Marvel and DC historically treated its creative members? I think it's fair. I said this in multiple videos before. The standard of practice of how publishers deal with freelancer, work for hires, or employees for that matter, was what it was. Marvel and DC didn't do anything crazy or mistreat its staff. You know, so I really can never say anything bad about how Marvel and DC treated its staff in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, because that's how business was done. I mean, it's hard for people to grasp the concept that when you work for somebody, even today, they own what you create. If you don't like that, don't work for other people. Make your own company. I give this example a million times. I used to work for a company. They hired me specifically to create a software. After 2 years of a lot of hard work, I was able to produce what they wanted. For my hard work, I got a $400 bonus, okay, on top of my $30,000 a year salary. Right after I got the bonus, I gave my 2-week notice because I was not happy with the $400 bonus, because I knew that software will make the company millions. Okay, so but it took me roughly 2 years later in order to come up with my own software, a competing software, and I started my own firm, and I have achieved the American dream my own way. So I have always on the side that I don't fault people for being naive in not knowing what they sign, or not knowing what they got themselves into. But once you get into the 70s, especially in comic books, where the issues that Jack Kirby and the rest of the people, the creators in the 60s and prior experience, with Schuster, Siegel, with Superman, by the 70s, the issues of ownership and creative right are well known. So for anyone that go to work for Marvel and DC and not know that, gee, I created Wolverine and or whatever character, how come I don't own the right to that? Then it's like I said, I can't fault Marvel and DC in how they run the business. It is what it is. As far as the pay issues, I don't think I can't speak for since I don't know exactly how much they get paid. I have read many places that Kirby, I think at the peak of his earning, was making something like $90,000 a year. Correct me if I'm wrong. I read this somewhere. $90,000 in the early 70s is a lot of money. He deserved it, but the for a lot of creators, the pay is tied into how well the books was received, right? So it ties into how fast you can draw and how much you can sell. So I really can't comment that Marvel and DC keep pay low. Uh, you know, Look at John Byrne. John Byrne at the height of his popularity, the man is fast. He can draw 2 books. Okay, he can write and draw 2 books if he wanted to. So and he was selling 400,000 issues of Fantastic Four on top of whatever title he was drawing. So I'm sure he was making a lot of money. Marvel changed the way they give out royalties in the late 80s and early 90s. Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane made crazy money when they were doing X-Men and Spider-Man. But being young, brash, arrogant, that wasn't enough for them. And kudos for them to leave and start Image. But from everything that I have read and heard, even Chris Claremont got crazy money for writing the X-Men in the 90s and working with Jim Lee. So it's correlated with the sales of the book in many parts. And on top of that, you got to understand Marvel, DC, they are they're a public company, right, with shareholders. And I have had this discussion with many people when it comes down to stock, ownership, shareholders, and employees for this company. For example, if you work for IBM, for example, the shareholder of IBM expect and demand better earnings every quarter, higher sales every quarter. That's how the stock go up, right? So a shareholders, the demand to keep costs, to keep expense in line or low in order to maximize profit, to maximize shareholder values, dictate how much the company can pay you. So if you work for IBM, guess what? In order for your stock to do well, you either have to have better sales, better earning. If you don't have both of those combination, you better have less expense. So guess what? You're not getting your raise or bonuses because the shareholders won't like it if they give you a big raise or bonuses when it impact earnings. So there's a lot of moving parts to why a corporate have to do what a corporate have to do. And I think that's one of the bad thing about the economy. Okay, I can go into a tangent on economic talk, but the more publicized, the more many private company become public company where they issue share to shareholder, the more problem it create for the workers, because once the company become public and other people have vested interest in good earnings, higher stock prices, then the staff is gonna get less of the piece of the pie. Okay, I'm not saying the company won't take care of the staff, because without good staff you won't have good company and you won't have good sales, all that stuff. So it's a balance. Okay, it's a fine balance between trying to please the shareholders while maintaining good staff. So when Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld and all those guys left, sure, they made more money with Image because the pie had to cut in many less slices, but kudos to them. But as far as has it scare off creators from trying new and interesting stories. I think a lot of creators today are so geared toward the big money. That's one of my biggest gripe with today's creators. Seem like everybody is trying to write the next big things for the TV or movies, right? That's what all the hype is from all the independent books. Every seem like every independent books that come out from the independent titles have rumors of potential TV pilots, movies, you name it. And if you are creators or writers and your sole purpose from the very start on creating this new story, this new characters, is potentially trying to tie it in to a bigger picture, okay, which is a TV show or movie for the bigger bucks, the last thing you want to do is get involved with Marvel or DC, because then it's a lot tougher to negotiate with the AMC and the TNT of the world instead of just you. Okay, so it's more of a business move than something wrong with Marvel or DC, as far as, oh, I don't want to work for Marvel or DC because, if I create this new character these days, with the way royalties are given and creative rights are given, I don't think it's definitely not as good as being independent without them, but it's not as bad as it was prior to the 80s or 90s. Okay, so it has more to do with, many of the younger creators just want to not deal with having to deal with the bigger boss at Marvel if they can struck a deal with the studios. It's easier to go into a meeting with just you. I own this idea, and just give me X million for the TV rights and we're all set. But that's really, is, I think, more of a main driver on why a lot of new creative ideas and concepts are developed outside of Marvel and DC than the big evil corporate world. It's well, the other segment, of course, is Marvel and DC is more into, the superheroes. They never really segue into the topics that many independent titles are going for. So like I said, it's a good balance. To me, where the industry is today, as far as how DC and Marvel and the rest of the independent company operates, I think it suits well for everybody. If you love to draw Spider-Man, you can go work for Marvel, and if you create a new character for Spider-Man, you will get a piece of the pie. It's not the same way it was when Steve Ditko was drawing Spider-Man. So I don't think it would deter anybody that love to work for Marvel drawing Spider-Man to create something for Marvel if needed. The thing about artists, whether it's musician or pencilers or whatever, is in the inner soul to create something. So the idea that I'm gonna go for Marvel, but I'm not gonna create anything new because I don't want them to own it, it's not really something that is healthy for the brain. Okay, I think for most people, it's even like in the 70s. A lot of people, a lot of creators worked for Marvel in the 70s and 80s and 90s before all the rights change. They know that they don't own their creation, but they have to create. How else would they? It's the lifeblood of the writers and the authors to create something new. You can only draw Spider-Man fighting the team, the members of the Sinister Six for so long, right? You gotta come up with new ideas. So I don't give much credit to the ideas that people held back working for Marvel or DC in the 70s or 80s, and because they don't want to let Marvel have all the rights. I think the problem with the 70s and 80s had more to do with the over saturation of superheroes, where they were running out of good ideas. They created plenty, okay. There were plenty of bad characters that were created in the 70s and 80s. So I don't think there was a shortage of creation. There was a shortage of good creation. Anyhow, I hope that answered your question, Daniel. Thank you. Sorry I missed your question the first time around.